من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابة رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah, I know some of you have gone through this before. Have you gone through this before?
No, with a teacher.
Okay. We're on Kitab al-Salat. So the intention today is, if Allah wills it, to finish. We won't be able to finish Kitab al-Salat. So we will finish the Fara'id and hopefully, the Fard al-Ain and the Fard al-Kifaya. If we're lucky, if Allah wills it, we'll move on to, Sajda Sahw. But definitely finish the Ain and the Kifaya, inshallah. So, Ali, if you can just read verse 99 for me. So the Arabic is Kitab al-Salat. Fara'id al-Salat 16 شروطها 4 مفتقر. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
90?
Verse 99. Just the verse 99.
It's page 25.
Page 25, there you go. The book of prayer.
Would you like me to read the English one? Because my Arabic is
No, that's all you've got to do. Just read the English.
Okay. There are 16 fard obligations of the Salah, and carrying them out is conditional upon 4 things, which must be compiled with 100 sayings. That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're relying on Sidi Mayara's commentary, explanation of the text. Now, Sidi Mayara, if you don't know anything about him, he's a student of the author. And he's actually more well known in Maliki fiqh than the teacher is. And he has more detailed works in fiqh, especially on ahkam and usul. So the obligatory obligations of prayer are 16. The conditions of them are 4. Now, the thing is that it doesn't go in order. He will not give us the conditions straight away. He'll give us, the 16 obligations first. So it's I'm going to stick to the text as much as I can. Where I give you my opinion, I'll tell you. Otherwise, I'm just going to share with you Sidi Mayara's explanation. So, what does the word prayer, salat, mean? Now, it's taken from, dua, supplication. Now, the word dua and salat are literally synonyms in Arabic. Yeah? By the way, if you need to ask. I don't mind, because the more you ask, the more I know that you're actually I'm getting through. Yeah. Okay. Now, Qadi Iyad, he says this was something that was well known in the speech of the Arabs. The word dua and salat. If you get an opportunity, or if have any Christian Arabs, you'll find that they use exactly the same word, salat, but they use it for dua. Not because they don't have specific, because their prayer is not like ours, but they will still even the service is called salat as well, and the supplication is called salat, or dua is a synonym. Okay. Now, what the Sharia has done is it's added statements and actions to supplication. Because Dua is literally just supplicating. But the word salat in the Sharia has actions added to it, rather than just words that you articulate. Now, it is said, another position is actually comes from the word to connect. Literally this, if I take that out, and I plug it in, that's sila. It's literally connecting. The slave is connecting to the sustainer. And it's, the connection, keep in mind, it's language, it's got nothing to do with God. So if you connected two things, would be sila. Yeah? God is not a thing, but we're a thing. But we're using it in the same way. Yeah? Connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if you leave it, it's a sin. The author's not going to go that much into leaving it. He will come back to it, inshallah. Now, Sidi Mayara says that you need to know that salat has conditions, obligations, sunan, and recommendations. The difference between a condition and a fard, does anybody know the difference? Between an obligation and a condition. Okay. Conditions are always outside of prayer. Conditions are always outside of prayer, and obligations are in prayer. Now, conditions, Sidi Mayara here says that, the conditions are qismain, two types. Shart al-wujub, condition of obligation. This is something that, it only is sought from us. Mukallif. I remember last time we went through this word. Do people remember?
Can I look back?
No, don't look back.
I can't remember.
Okay. It's literally someone under obligation.
Sorry?
Someone under burden, under obligation. Yeah? The word taklif is not the Pakistani understanding of taklif.
Oh, okay.
Or the Bengali understanding of taklif. Yeah? It's literally under obligation. Yeah? We're under obligation. And yes.
Sorry, with the condition and obligation, could you just give examples of each? Because you said condition is outside prayer. What would it?
As I said, I'm going to stick to the text.
Okay.
He will, the way that Sidi Ibn Ashir has arranged it, it keeps not to the order like a teaching text.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps to the meter because it's a verse. So if the conditions don't fit the meter if he puts it right afterwards. So he'll give us the 16 obligations, and then he'll give us the 4 conditions. Yeah, we will come to them. Yeah, so it's either conditions of obligation or conditions of ada, literally, of performance, of you doing it. Now, there is actually in the detailed texts, this is from me, there is a third set. So there's always shurut al-wujub wa shurut al-saha or ada, and then, where they're combined. That's the third condition. You'll find it in Sidi Khalil and others, but Sidi Mayara is just making it easy. He's just sticking to two of them. Right, the condition of obligation. Yeah, condition of obligation are 5. Islam. So you've got to be a Muslim. You've got to be pubescent or mature. You've got to be sane, and you've got to be free from menstrual bleeding and post-birth bleeding, postnatal bleeding, and the time of the prayer has to have come in. Now, Qadi Iyad has added another one, that the message must have reached you. Yeah. Do you understand that one? Yeah? Bulugh al-Da'wah.
It's the same opinion of Imam Ghazali as well.
What does he say?
That it kind of links to if a person will be judged based on if the message has come to them or not.
Okay. So, in our context, children that are born up and not taught anything about the deen, or Muslims who are just relying on information from outside, the opinion of majority of scholarship within Islam is the message has not reached them, even if they've read books on the deen. Yeah, they must have had the correct message. So if you're Sunni, you must have had the Sunni message of Islam, and if you're Shia, the Shia message of Islam. And both Shias and Sunnis are in total agreement. If you get a book, because all the libraries in the UK have a book by the Ahmadis on Islam, so if you read one of those, the message has not reached you. Yeah. Okay.
And then number 4, what was it free of? Sorry.
Pardon?
You said number 4 was free from...
Free from bleeding, menstrual bleeding, and postnatal bleeding. It's too early in the morning. Postnatal bleeding. Yeah? Okay. Now, what Sidi Mayara says that, when you become pubis, when you mature, yeah, we will cover that further down. Or have we covered it? We covered it last. We did. But
in the section of Mukallaf.
Yeah, we did cover it. But what he says is that once you mature, the condition of Bulugh al-Dawah drops. Because it's expected that, your parents should have taught you by then. Yeah? Or the people that you're sitting with, learning from, you should have been taught by them.
Sorry, question.
Yeah.
Does a mature depend on the context of the culture? As in, when a person is mature? Like in this society, a person is semi-mature at 16 and properly mature at 18.
Or a man at 25.
Imam Mazri doesn't agree with that. He says it's not culturally relative because the Sharia has given us the condition. It's not the lawgiver, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has laid it down. And then in Surah Nur you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when they reach a certain age they have to seek permission before they come onto the parents. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid it down. It's not culturally relative. There are the conditions that semen, menstrual bleeding, the pubic hair, the voice breaking, and then with the Malikiyah, with the Shafis it's 15, with us the cut-off point by which if none of those signs are seen, automatically when you complete the year 18, not when you enter 18, when you complete. So when the 19th year kicks in, you automatically will be regarded by the Sharia as an adult. So the laws of the weight of the Sharia will fall upon you. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is Sidi Mayara brings this in. This is a Maliki-centric opinion that we hold the non-Muslims under obligation by the branches of the Sharia. Yeah, they're addressed as well as the Muslims. Yeah. And Sidi Mayara says, Huwa Sahih. That's, the correct position. When you get time, if you look up, Surah Fussilat, ayah 6 and 7, and Surah Mudaththir 43 and 42, you'll understand where we're coming from.
Sorry, which surah was it again?
Fussilat and Mudaththir. Fussilat is 6 and 7, and Mudaththir is 42 and 43. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُشْرِكِينَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. Yeah? لَا يُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. So they're under obligation. Yes.
By obligation, do you mean that they have to understand the message or realize the message at a certain point?
I'm not going to go into that because I'll end up, we'll waste more time. Not waste, but it's that with the Maliki, it's not. What it is that the branches of Allah commands them. Yeah, because what you've got to understand is that with the Malikiyah, we very rarely. I don't know of any where we walk away from a principle. From on usul. Very rarely. I was going to say very rarely, but I can't think of any. So, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, you see, He says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُشْرِكِينَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. Allah's finding fault that, they don't give zakat. But are they under obligation? So if they were not under obligation, why is Allah finding fault with them? Yeah? And then مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُكَ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. That's from Mudaththir. So here, zakat and salat is Allah's finding fault. Okay. As I said, that after the 16 obligations, and we'll cover the conditions of prayer in detail. Okay. We move on to the 16 obligations of prayer. Now, Ali, if you can, verses 100 to 104.
Sure. The saying of Allahu Akbar, which marks entry into the salah, and its sanctity, by which all other actions but the salat are excluded. The standing for salat and the intention. Also obligatory, the Fatiha done while standing and the bowing. The return to standing position after it, and prostration with submissiveness. And also is obligatory, raising one's hands from the ground, saying salam, sitting for this salam, and the order of the fard elements when performing these obligations. Standing straight for a moment while relaxing the limbs, and at the same time, those behind the imam must perform takbiratul ihram, I think. I don't know if I pronounced it. And the salam after him. One should make an intention to perform the salat following the imam, just as the imam should make an intention in the fair in joining the two salats in the Jummah and whenever standing in for the imam.
Okay. Now, Sidi Mayara explains, the first obligation of prayer is the takbiratul ihram. Now, the Malikiyya were very particular about this. It has to be Allahu Akbar. That's it. No other word. If you read, I don't know, if you've read behind a Gujarati, they'll say Allahu Akbar or Allahu Akbar. No, it has to be succinct, clear. Yeah, Allahu Akbar. It's an obligation upon the imam, upon the individual, and the one praying behind the Imam. The Imam can't carry you for this. It's an obligation upon every one of us when we begin the prayer. It's, literally it marks the beginning of the conversation. When we covered the Tahara, I gave the analogy of, preparing for an interview. So this, when you stand, when you say Allahu Akbar, literally, not the interview, but the discourse begins. So you have to say Allahu Akbar. No other word will do. And it has to be, in line with the niyyah. We'll come to the niyyah in a moment. As to someone, who is unable or is ignorant of Arabic, who is ignorant of Arabic, Imam Abhari says that the niyyah, the intention, will suffice. Now, this can be, these opinions are very relevant for us, especially, people who come new into the deen. People don't know Arabic, but their intention will suffice. So if they come and stand behind the Imam, if they can't say Allahu Akbar, we don't permit an alternative. So their intention will suffice. Abu Farj, rahimullah, he says that, especially, someone who has entered the deen. That's Abu Farj's opinion. There is an opinion, when, the jurists use this word qeel, means a not a well-known opinion, or a rare opinion, that, they can use a synonym from their language. This is so rare. It's majority of our scholarship will, throw it out, but it's there. Abu Farj is a scholar from the madhab. There is no khilaf that the recitation can't be replaced in their language within the madhab. For instance, Fatiha, could they read it in English or Farsi or Urdu or Bengali within the... Actually, I watched Rashad, I watched a video of some Bengalis reading it in our Bengali. I found it interesting.
You sure that wasn't just his recitation?
It can't be replaced with any other language. If they are unable to recite it in Arabic, it will not. Their intention will suffice. Wa alaikum salam. Come and sit down.
Sorry, is that the second intention?
Pardon?
Is that the second intention?
No. We're still on takbir. We're still on takbir. This is Sidi Miyara explaining his work. The Imam, before he says the takbir, he should look behind and see that the safs are straight before he says the takbir. You'll find a lot of the old mosques and zawiyas in Morocco. the Imam has someone appointed whose job is to see that the safs are straight, and then he'll come and tell him they're straight, and then he'll say the takbir. Now, the takbir must be connected to that specific prayer. So you must know which prayer. We don't have this thing that you can you have a different intention to the Imam. It has to be that prayer. Are we clear on that? It has to be Allahu Akbar. Can't be any other language. No synonym. Someone who enters to the deen, who can't articulate it, someone who's actually has a speech impediment, who can't speak, his intention will suffice. Yeah? Okay. We okay on that? So the second obligatory action of prayer is the standing for the takbiratul ihram. So apart from the latecomer, in Jamaat, it's an obligation upon everyone to stand. Yeah? So, with the latecomer, if he finds them in Ruku, he doesn't stand and say the takbir, he says takbir and goes into Ruku. As long as he makes the intention that, that takbir was takbiratul ihram. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Is that the bit like after the adhan and they're like Allah?
No.
No,
where is the opening takbir for prayer?
Oh, okay, yeah. You have to be standing,
Yeah, you have to stand for. It's an obligation to stand for that takbir.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. This chair business, have you seen them in I have to bite my tongue every time I go to the mosque, because these brethren of ours, they'll walk up the stairs right to the front of the saf, and then they'll sit. Yeah? No. Even in Hanafi fiqh, they void their prayer. Void it. There's a very famous, he's a well-known scholar of our time, Sheikh Abdul Hamid al-Mubarak from Ahsa. He said, look, do you think that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ they didn't have chairs? Or it was unknown? He says, look, God tells you, he talks about the throne of Solomon, which was a chair. Yeah, it's unheard of historically. In even this new opinions that are given, they need to be rechecked, because the Prophet ﷺ and in the Quran, how does Allah say? Allah says, يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قُعُودًا, they remember Allah sitting, standing, and on their sides. By the way, that's to do with prayer. Yeah? So if you can't stand, you sit. If you can't sit, you lie on your side. And praying in Jamaat is not an obligation if you're sick. Because if you've got a problem, it's not an obligation. Jamaat is not an obligation apart from the Dahiriyah, the literalists, which we don't have. They try to raise their hands and they get hit down. Those games, at the fair.
Whack 'em all.
You whack them on. The literalists, they've always been whacked on the head, but they need to be whacked a lot harder nowadays than before. But it's never. So, if you can't stand, sit. If you can't sit, lie down. So you have to stand.
So, people who can't go to sujood, can they sit?
Pardon?
People who can't actually go to sujood. They can stand, but they can't make sujood. For example, my dad, he's got kidney issues.
Okay.
And he can't go into sujood, so he has, for a period of time, he had to sit.
Okay.
And he made sujood by just kind of
okay.
not going into sujood.
He's Hanafi.
Yeah.
So what's the fatwa he follows?
That's
Okay.
that's the fatwa he was given, that he has to put his hands
on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, but he bows his head.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just, we'll come to it, because the sajda's not on the hands, it's on the head.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, he put...
Our rules don't apply to Hanafis.
Okay.
It's that you have to understand that, the standing thing, it's across the board. If you have a problem, that's fine. If you can't do it, then if you can't stand, sit. If you can't sit, then lie down. Yes?
With sitting, do you mean sitting on the floor, sitting also on a chair?
No, on the floor.
On the floor.
Not on chair.
People can't sit because of knee problems, as I've seen this in mosques, that women also can't sit because of their knees somehow, or their weight and knees, and they would sit on chairs.
The thing is that, that's what our scholarship needs to look at again. Because what you find is that the problems and illnesses are not new. I do not know of any. I know the doctors come up with redefine illnesses and all that, but majority of ailments we've historically had them. People have always had joint problems. They've always had weight problems. Have you heard of Abul Hassan? What's his name? Muhammad Shaybani.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great Hanafi Imam. Imam Shafi'i used to wonder, how agile he was, because he was a bit plump, To him, he was his teacher, but subhanAllah, very agile. So people have always had problems.
I think it's a practical thing, because I'm just wondering if they would lay down, for example, it would take maybe more space or so the chair is...
No, because in mosques, the thing is that people can walk, people can stand. Yeah? Mm-hmm. People can stand.
They will stand, but then when it comes to the sujood, they will sit.
Okay, so when they go into sujood, people can go into sujood. People have a problem standing up from sujood afterwards. So they just sit. It's just that, people need to look at those things. I'm with Sheikh Abdul Hamid. I don't like chairs in mosques.
But Sheikh, what if someone has that problem where it becomes for example, my father can't bend at all, so he can, but it causes extreme discomfort to him, so he does use a chair. What's the opinion on that? Maliki ways?
He's not Maliki though.
He's not, my father's not. So our family's
So I don't need to give an opinion, do I?
fair enough.
This is a very Maliki way of sorting problems out. But the thing is, it's best to ask a Hanafi scholar about it. So, okay. So, I have to say the takbir, we have to stand for it. The third obligation is the niyyah, the intention. Now, the niyyah needs to be connected with the takbir. It needs to be you need to know which prayer that you're praying. You don't need to articulate it. The place of the intention is always the heart. It's never the tongue. Something, this is from me, but it's not me, it's Sidi Ahmad Zarruq. And this is how our scholarship understands, because every act of worship is to draw close to God. So the intention is always to come close to God. So if you make the intention that, I'm going to pray Salatul Dhuhr, it will suffice. Yeah? But if you said, I'm praying Dhuhr to come close to God, yeah, it will, because actions are by intention. Yeah? So if you get used to adding taqarrubu ila Allah, it's good. Yeah? To come close to God. You don't have to, in your intention that this is, 4 rakats of Salat al-Dhuhr and all of that. You don't need to articulate, be that specific. Okay. It doesn't have to be in Arabic. It should be in your language. You should know what you're doing. Yeah. Are we okay on that? The fourth obligation is the recitation of Surah Fatiha. Now this is an obligation upon the Imam and the individual, not if you are praying behind the Imam.
Do you just not move your lips at all if it's like a loud prayer? You just kind of...
What, Fatiha?
Yeah.
When you recite it?
Yeah, like if you're behind the Imam and it's like you're reciting out loud.
Okay.
Do you just stay silent while he's reciting?
You listen to the Qur'an.
Yeah, but you don't like move your lips.
No, but why would you move the lips? Because it's not an obligation upon you.
Just if you wanted to recite it.
You can't.
Okay. So you're just supposed to listen.
You listen.
Behind
the Imam, you listen. You listen to the Qur'an.
Okay. Some people muttering, so I'm just wondering.
You can't mutter.
Okay, got it.
You can't mutter. You can't move your lips.
Shafi'i's problem.
That's Shafi's problem.
Is it so? That's in audible prayers. You can't. You just have to listen. But in inaudible prayers,
yeah.
Where you can't listen to them.
We'll come to it.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you're praying on your own, it's an obligation upon you. It's always an obligation upon the Imam. If you're leading, it doesn't matter if it's audible or inaudible, you will always have to say Fatiha. When you are behind the Imam, if you're praying behind the Imam, we'll come to it in the recommendations. It's not an obligation. It's only an obligation to recite Fatiha in Jamaat, for the Imam and when you're praying on your own, not in Jamaat. Doesn't matter if the prayer is audible or inaudible, it's not an obligation.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The Imam carries you.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So even like in Dhuhr and Asr, very silent prayer, and if you're praying behind the Imam, do you have to recite it then?
it's not an obligation. Because what you've got to understand, the way the text is arranged, is that it goes through what are obligations of prayer, then we'll come to, the sunan of prayer, and then we'll come to the recommendations of prayer. Yeah? And then I'll bring them all together for you, inshallah. But why they're arranged that way is if you miss an obligation out, you void your prayer. If you miss a sunnah out, you can correct it. Well, you can always, as long as you're in prayer, you can always correct your prayer, as long as you don't walk away from it. But we'll come to that. Now, you do not in fard prayer, if you're praying behind the imam, if you're praying on your own, if you're the imam, you do not make a dua before Fatiha. You do not say A'udhu Billahi Ta'awudh, yeah? And you don't say the basmala. Those are no-nos for us. Yeah?
Is it Islamic?
Pardon?
Is it Islamic?
We'll come to them.
Okay.
Yeah? But no dua, no ta'awudh, no basmala. Now, if someone doesn't know Fatiha, then he should learn Fatiha. Because it's an obligation. And you should try to learn from someone who knows the makharij, where the letters come out, so the pronunciation is correct. Fatiha is the only prayer surah that you need to get bang on, because it's an obligation.
Sheikh, just a quick question, I'm slightly confused. So after takbir, it's straight Fatiha with nothing in between?
Nothing in between. Because reason why, it's, you've got to understand that the school of Medina takes tawatur, not ahad. Yeah. So when there's something mass transmitted, and then you've got solitary reports, we never reject hadith. Yeah. It's a word I like. We park them. Yeah. But we will go by tawatur. So we've got Sayyidina Anas bin Malik saying he prayed behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prayed behind Abu Bakr, he prayed behind Umar, he prayed behind Uthman. There's a narration he prayed behind Ali. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would begin after takbir, would open his prayer with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. It was always Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. The fifth obligation is to stand for Fatiha. Now, we've already said that, the people praying behind the Imam, it's not an obligation for them to recite Fatiha. So, do they need to stand? Yes?
Because of the previous.
Pardon?
Because of the previous obligation.
Which is that? Which
to
is
stand
what?
For saying Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, but this is Fatiha. So it's an obligation for the Imam to recite Fatiha. Yeah? It's an obligation for the individual praying on his own to recite Fatiha. It's not an obligation upon the ones praying behind the Imam to recite Fatiha. Now it's an obligation to stand for that recitation. Yeah? So it's an obligation for the imam, and it's an obligation for the individual. So the ones that are standing behind the imam, praying behind the imam, it's just a question from me. Yeah? Is it an obligation for them to stand?
Yes, it must be, because it's an obligation for Fatiha, but even if they're not...
but they're not under obligation to recite Fatiha.
But the obligation says you have to stand for Fatiha. That means that...
No, but only the obligation is to stand for the period that you recite Fatiha. So it's an obligation for the imam to recite. It's an obligation for the individual to recite. It's not an obligation for those praying behind the imam to recite. So it's just a question, just to make it interesting. Is it an obligation?
Yeah, I think so. Sitting down.
Pardon?
They sit down for it, and they get like that.
Can they? Can they?
Can this, but
What if
I think it must be, because it doesn't
What was
say
the Medinan
stand
practice?
you can't say...
No. I'm just making it interesting. It's an obligation for them to stand, not for Fatiha, but to obey the imam. They're under obligation to follow the imam. So they're under obligation to stand because the imam is standing, not to stand to recite Fatiha. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Because we're under obligation to follow the imam. So because the imam is standing, we're under obligation to stand because we're following the imam. Does that make sense? Yes, Ali.
But then if we're following that, then wouldn't that be the same as saying that, okay, if he's saying Fatiha, then we also have to say Fatiha? Is that an exception to the rule that that's something you can't do that the imam is doing?
No, for the audible prayers you listen. Yeah, the recommendation is, is to recite Fatiha in the inaudible ones, but it's not an obligation. Yes.
So I remember reading Masani's book, and he has a nice kind of couplet about anything the imam does, you have to do. Anything he says, you don't have to say, except for the takbiratul ihram and the salam.
Okay.
So it's like a simple way of remembering it all.
Yeah.
Does that also include if the imam is ill and he sits down?
He can't. No.
You
can't do it. You shouldn't lead the prayer.
This was the case when
you shouldn't lead the prayer.
When the Prophet ﷺ was ill.
Yes.
And he had to sit.
Yes, but what did Abu Bakr do?
He stood up.
Yeah.
He stood up.
Right next to him.
Yeah. So what did the Jamaat do? Did they stand? Sit or stand?
They stand.
They stood. There you go. You have to stand. It's an obligation to stand. Yeah. So it's Hausi the Mayara is saying it's an obligation to follow the imam. So those praying behind the imam, because they're not under obligation to recite Fatiha, they're under obligation to follow the imam. So they stand to follow the imam. Okay. 6 is Ruku. Now, the minimum obligation is literally to put your hands. I've forgotten your name. Nabil, you'll have to stand up for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Watch Nabil now. Just put your hands, the palm of your hand, inside of your palms, on your knees.
Yes.
No.
Inside.
No, what you've done is, I didn't ask you to bend.
Oh.
I asked you to just put your hands on your knees.
Okay.
Go on
This is
then.
why I opt out.
So without bending my back?
No, try.
I don't understand.
I've got to do this.
You want me to bend down like that?
No. Look, that's it.
Okay.
That's the obligation
Oh, wow.
for Ruku. Yeah? The obligation of Ruku is literally to bend, to bow. Yeah, it's literally that.
Like I've heard it so many times throughout my life that you have to be like straight, or is that?
No, that's a recommendation. We're talking about, this is why this text.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's an obligation. Now, if that's the minimum, that's an obligation for you to do. You know, the things that you were saying that, you know, he can't bend or whatever.
Yeah.
If you can do this, you've fulfilled the obligation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So is the obligation to put your hands on your knee?
Your hands on your knee. That's the obligation. Yeah? To flatten it, that's recommended.
Oh, so you're not meant to bend your leg? Because I had one.
No, we'll come to that.
It really confused me.
We'll come to that. That's why we're doing the obligatory aspects of prayer first.
So obligatory is just to put your hands on your
It's
knees.
literally to bend.
Okay.
Yeah? To put your hands on your knees.
Yeah.
Yeah? So if that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm.
You don't bring your head down either. Yeah?
You're looking.
No, you know, so the obligation is this, not this.
Okay,
Yeah? Now, when you do ruku, the knees slightly, they come in slightly. We'll do that. We'll cover it when we. But you do look down, but you don't have to bring your head down. Your neck doesn't drop. The seventh obligation is to rise from the ruku. Now, if you miss that, you will have to repeat that ruku.
So you can miss the Fatiha and you can miss the takbir, but if you miss the Ruku, you have to repeat the.
No, you miss any aspect of the fard, any
For the
of these
latecomers.
16. That's why we're going through the 16. You miss any one of them, you're going to void your prayer if you don't correct it. Yeah? That's why, you know, the fara'id of prayer, these 16, are so important to know. You miss one of them out, and you don't correct it, you will void your prayer.
So if you're following the Imam and then you catch the rak'ah in Ruku and then you miss your Fatiha.
No, the Imam can only carry you for the Imam can't carry you for two things. He'll carry you for everything else. Is the salam and the takbir. If you're behind the Imam,
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah, those two things he can't carry you for. If you don't begin the prayer, he can't help you. And you've got to end it yourself. So you've got a beginning and end it.
Okay.
And in between, the Imam will carry you. But we're talking about individually.
Okay.
Yeah? If you're praying on your own, you have to rise up from ruku. Yeah? The eighth obligation is sajda. Yeah? Alaikum salam to you. Yeah? It's sajda. Now, the sajda is associated with submission and humility. Yeah? Because you're literally, humbling yourself in front of God. Now, the obligatory aspect of the sajda is that, the forehead and the nose has to touch the ground. Just the forehead and the nose. That's the obligation. Okay? Not your hands or knees or toes. Yeah? It's the forehead and the nose.
Do they have to touch first?
Say again?
Do they have to touch first before anything else touches the ground? Because I've heard this one that you can't put your hands first and then then these two parts. Let's stick with the obligation and we'll come back to your question. Yeah. If you touch the ground in your sajda, if you just touch with your forehead and you miss the nose, you will always have to come back with another sajda. So it's always the nose and the sajda.
Is that a sajda of forgetfulness, or do you have to repeat the whole report?
No, any sajda. The obligation of a sajda, the obligatory aspect of a sajda is the nose and the forehead.
Mm-hmm. So if you realise just after you finish the prayer that you didn't touch your nose on the floor, you'll
have to do more than a sajda sahw. You'll have to come back with the rak'ah. Because it's an obligation, and for the obligation, what's the first thing of the what's the first obligation? Come on, takbir and standing for it, and then niyyah, then Fatiha, then
standing for Fatiha,
then Ruku, then rising from Ruku, then sajda.
Oh, so you got to
you can't just do a sajda. To do a sajda, you have to do all of that, and it has to be in that order. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you miss the nose, you will always have to come back with a sajda. You'll have to repeat. Yeah. So to make sure that your sajda is correct, make sure that the nose touches first, then the forehead. If your nose touches first, you'll always get the sajda right.
I should be very particular.
What do you mean?
Try and put your nose on the floor.
Yeah, put your nose on the floor first. Put your nose on the floor, then the forehead. Not the forehead and then the nose. If you get it in that order, you'll always get it right. So, nose first, then the forehead. It's a recommendation to put the hands first. And I know we live in this country, and we've got it either carpeted or what's the other? Laminated. It's difficult to do sajda on the ground. This is not the ground, this is the carpet. The ideal is that you do it on the ground. Do you know that the Prophet ﷺ's mosque never had anything on the floor? Never. Now they did have mats, but in the masjid there was nothing. And it was that is how it was till the end period of Sayyidina Umar radhiyallahu anhu's khilafah. And then straw, a reed was thrown on it. And then at the time of Sayyidina Uthman, reed mats were laid out. What you'll find is that if you can do it, there's something that happens to your body. With so many electronic stuff, Rashad, what's the word? When you get rid of electricity from your body?
Earthing.
Desensitize?
Huh?
Earthing.
Oh well, whatever. Yeah, but that's what when you do sajda on the ground, It literally, the earth takes all the excess electricity from your body. So if you can do it, it's good.
You earth yourself.
You earth yourself.
Yeah, because like whenever I'm playing like parks on the grass, it just feels different.
Yes.
It's really nice. I'm like,
oh, that's good. Go and pray in the park.
like when you're like traveling and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. But the ideal is that you pray on the ground. There shouldn't be anything. But if your house is carpeted or laminated, that's fine. To throw something else, prayer mat, on top of this, that's I really don't understand the reason why.
So you shouldn't use a prayer mat?
Why? If it's clean.
Yeah.
If the carpet is clean. Pardon?
It's just a custom in Asian communities.
It's a bad custom.
Controversial question.
Go on.
Are you allowed to pray on a plane?
We're dealing with obligations.
So the obligatory time to pray is coming. You're on a plane. Of course, you don't have to pray.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the Shias use that stone.
That's relevant. Yes.
Is that something that we could do?
No.
No.
That's a definite. We can't do.
I have a
It's
half
like
Shia family.
Sorry?
Turba. Yeah. No, we can't do that. No. What we do is, if your house is carpeted, that's fine. If it's clean, there's no reason, to put out a carpet. Yeah. If it's laminated, fine. If you find that hard, fine, use it. There's a reason. Yeah. But putting something out specifically when there's no reason is pointless. Yeah. As long as it's clean. And outside the pavement, sun hitting it, it's clean. Okay. Unless it's very hot or it's very cold. There's a reason there. Or it's very hard. Laminated floors are hard, or wooden floors are hard. Something which is quite relevant to this, it will get covered again. The forehead, because it's an obligation that it touches the ground, there shouldn't be any barrier. So that, your hijab or your topi or your imama should not be covering it. Yeah? There shouldn't be any.
Forehead?
Pardon?
Does your whole forehead have just like a part of it?
Well, your forehead. As long as the forehead touches.
Okay.
Yeah. 9. Rising from the sajda. Now, I've actually seen this, people not raise their hands. Yeah? When they, sit from the sajda, the hands are still on the floor and they've gone back for the second sajda. Won't be counted.
How do you mean? So the hands on the floor?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
You have to, when you rise from sajda, your hands have to rise.
And you put it on the knees.
And you put them on the knees. Yeah. You can't just, leave them on the ground and rise up and then go back. No, won't do. I've seen people do it. But don't do that. It will not count.
So head first, so everything goes together.
Pardon?
As in, I'm trying to visualize it. It's not coming in my head. So you just take your hands off first and all rise.
No, your hands are the first to go and last to leave.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but they have to leave the ground. Okay. The 10th obligation is the salam, to end the prayer. You have to, just as we're very particular that when you begin the prayer, you have to articulate clearly the takbiratul ihram, the opening takbir, it has to be Allahu Akbar. To finish, to end the prayer, it has to be clear. Yeah? As-salamu alaykum. Full stop. Nothing added. Nothing taken away.
Can we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah?
No.
Just Assalamu alaikum.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes. It's an obligation.
And if you're like praying behind someone who says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, do you have...
You're not under obligation to say rahmatullah.
But it's a recommendation, maybe.
No.
Not Maliki.
The obligation for the Maliki, we're very particular, is Assalamu alaykum.
Do you reply to the Imam Salam?
We'll come to that. We're just dealing with the obligation at the moment. Yeah. You can't say Assalamu alaykum. No. Assalamu alaykum. Just as you can't say Allahu Akbar. One of my Mauritanian friends told me, if you walking in, the Imam's opening the prayer, and he says that, just pick his sandals and go home. It's the words are, because we hear and obey Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, it has to be Allahu Akbar, and it has to be Assalamu alaykum. Yeah. Now, if the Imam adds, kum, after that, prayer's finished. Yeah. Now, because if you're behind a Hanafi Imam, with them, I tell you can tell a knowledgeable Hanafi Imam from an unknowledgeable one. There's a slight pause after kum, and then he'll say wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Try it. Yeah. Keep looking. You'll actually notice it. Someone, a Hanafi who knows his fiqh, someone who's mahir, is well grounded in his fiqh, he'll pause very slightly, Assalamu alaykum, and then wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Those are additions. We're not saying that they're not correct. Those are valid opinions. For us, it has to be kum. Assalamu alaykum. Yeah.
I've seen a video of a Maliki scholar ending his prayer, but he extended the in salam. Is that permissible? So he made it slightly longer. I don't know why. Or is that not allowed?
What did he say?
Assalamu alaikum. Is that
the mad is there, but it's not. As long as what you've got to do is that people are following you. Keep in mind, people are following you. So when you're beginning the prayer, you're saying Allahu Akbar. So if you're saying Allahu Akbar, yeah, okay, there is a mad. Yeah, does it need to be that pronounced? So if there's no need, then there's no need. Yeah. So Allahu Akbar, then Assalamu alaykum. Yeah, that's the obligation, and that's the mashhur of the madhab. And when you end it, just as when you begin the prayer, your intention is to begin the prayer. When you say the takbiratul ihram, when you're ending the prayer, when you say you ended with the salam, so your intention is to finish the prayer. It has nothing to do with, I grew up with this, you're saying salam to this angel and you're saying salam to that angel. What about the one in front and the one at the back and the one above, the one below? No. It's literally to finish the prayer.
So do you say it once or twice?
No, it's one.
Just once. And do you move your head at all?
Because we're dealing with the fard,
Yeah.
the obligation is just to say the salam.
What?
Just as the obligation to begin the prayer is just to say Allahu Akbar. Did I mention anything else?
No.
It's just to say Allahu Akbar.
We didn't mention hands.
No,
Oh.
the obligation is to say Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, okay.
And so to end the prayer, the obligation is to say
Assalamu alaikum.
just once.
Once. Yeah? Okay.
The obligation is to also move your head or not?
I just said the obligation is to say Assalamu alaikum. Yeah?
Cindy, could we ask for a demonstration just of the obligations? Would you be okay with that?
It's literally just
No, as in the full prayer. As in
the
for you to-
obligation.
just to see the obligations as an example, as in
Let's finish
For
them
practical
first.
terms,
Let's
yeah.
finish them first.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it's literally Assalamu alaikum to end the prayer. Okay. The fifth obligation is to sit.
11?
Oh, sorry, 11.
11.
I don't know, what did I say, sixth?
You said it.
Fifth.
It's a Maliki thing.
It's a Maliki. No, it's not a
All the
Maliki
texts, they all do
No,
that.
it's not a Maliki thing. It's just historic. We're just bad with numbers.
Bad with numbers.
Which Sahabi is it who's really good with fara'id, heritage? Inheritance.
Obeyed in camp.
And his sons don't get that. We're not good with numbers. Okay. The 11th obligation is to sit for the period it takes you to say Assalamu alaikum. Yeah? Just for the amount of period it takes you to say Assalamu alaikum. Does that make sense? For the obligation to sit is just as long as it takes to say Assalamu alaikum. In excess of that is sunnah. We'll come to that when we come to the sunnah. Yeah? How we sit, we'll cover that when we come to the recommendations. But the obligation is to sit. How you sit, the obligation is just to sit. For the period it takes to say Assalamu alaikum. Yeah? Okay. The 12th, are we okay with that?
Yes.
Any questions on that? Okay. The 12th obligation is that, the fard is in order. Yeah? Tartib al-ada as-salat. So, you stand to say the takbir. You stand to say Fatiha. You go into Ruku. You rise from Ruku. You go into Sajda. You rise from Sajda. You say the salam and you sit for that period of salam. You okay on that? Okay. Now, the 13th obligation is the word i'tidal. If you come across this word, you come across the word adl. You can't tell me you haven't come across that. Adl. Yeah? Adl. Yeah? What does it mean?
Right. Oh.
No, adl. Just. Yeah? So, what does just mean?
To not be unjust.
Justice is literally to put everything in its right place, in its correct place. So that's what i'tidal means. That your bones go back to the original position. When you rise up from ruku, you're not rushing. Your bones need to go back to their original position. This word i'tidal, the Prophet ﷺ used, you know what we're going through, you'll find it all in one hadith. 14th is being calm, still.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Please.
You said your bones go back in the correct place. Does that mean you have to stand?
You know when you're standing,
Yeah.
your bones will naturally go back to their, natural position.
Yeah.
Yeah? So you know when you go into Ruku, and when you rise from Ruku, you've got to make sure that your bones go back. You're not rushing. That's i'tidal.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So you actually still for a second as opposed to...
No, still is not the word. Because, itmanan is calm still. Yeah. Because how itmanan is defined is, you're still. You're calm.
Does it also mean content?
Itmanan, yes. Yeah.
I'm just not understanding because
Okay. When you rise up from Ruku,
yeah.
you've got, don't rush. Go back to, because before you went into Ruku, what position were you in? Standing. Yeah. So that's what you've got to do. Go back to the standing position.
But why is this number 13?
13 is to make sure that you go back to that standing position.
Okay.
I'tidal. That your bones are back in their original position.
So basically every position is in
for every position. Whenever you move, when you go from sajda into sajda, that there's stillness, there's calmness.
Mm-hmm.
And the 14th is that itmanan, that you're calm, meaning that your limbs are still. There is no, Sidi Meara is very particular about this. He says there's no attachment, there's no correlation between i'tidal and itmanan. They're two separate things. Is the door open? Yeah. So you stand up, then you go into sajda. When you're in sajda, then when you sit up, that's it. Again, there needs to be i'tidal in that position, and then you go back into sajda.
So
yeah.
So that's two different things. So one is just being calm and still not rushing.
Yeah.
And one is giving each position its due.
Due.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we okay so far? Yeah. 15. The one praying behind the imam has to follow the imam in the takbir and the salah. Now, what does follow mean, by the way, in English? Ali's going to tell me now.
You have to do it after, we can't do it at the same time as him.
Follow, is you follow someone. You don't do it because even in English, when you do something in unison, you do it together. And when you follow, is you wait till the other has finished. Yeah? So you've got to wait till the imam finishes the takbirat al-ihram, then say Allahu Akbar. So when you hear the ra of the Allahu Akbar, then you begin. Yeah?
So does that mean that in every position that he takes, because sometimes people just quickly, when they literally see the imam just turning and they go straight for ruku.
Okay. What we the obligation is the beginning and the end.
Mm.
Yeah, the recommendation is what you're saying.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the particular thing is that you can't begin before the Imam and you can't finish till before the Imam. So that's why these are obligations. So you've got to finish once the Imam is finished saying Allahu Akbar, then you begin. And once you hear the kum, Assalamu alaikum, then you begin to say Assalamu alaikum. Yes.
I've had a case where there's a slightly older Imam leading the prayer, and as he gets up, he says Allahu Akbar.
Yeah.
But so I started standing up. By the time I finished standing up, he's still standing up.
Yeah.
So
that's fine. We're talking about the obligation is the beginning and the end.
Okay.
You didn't begin before he said Allahu Akbar, did you?
He was really slow to get up.
No, but we're talking about, when he began
With the
takbir, when he opened the prayer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the obligation is not to say the takbiratul ihram till the Imam is finished. Yeah? And not to end the prayer till the Imam has ended the prayer. So in the takbir and the salam, you have to follow the Imam. It's an obligation. In the others, it's a recommendation. So if you get into a habit, of in Jamaat, I'm always the last one to move, because Hanafi Imams have a habit of they'll move and then they'll say. Yeah.
What do you mean by that, Sheikh? I'm confused. They'll move and they'll say while they're moving, they're saying something.
No, they'll get up and say Sami Allahu liman hamida.
Right.
Is that so that
so people don't? Yeah, I don't move till I finish hearing.
Oh, okay, I see.
So if you get into the habit, because it's an obligation, yeah, that you finish, you follow the Imam in the beginning and the end, and it's a recommendation in between. Yeah, but just get into the habit. It's good habit. It's good practice. That don't move till the Imam has finished saying whatever he's saying. So once you hear him go silent, then move. Then say it. Yeah. It's only makruh, Nabil, to do it, move before. It's not, it doesn't void your prayer. But if you did this, it would. Yeah. Okay. The 16th. When you're praying behind the Imam, you have to make in your intention must be that you're imitating the Imam. Yeah. So you will always make the intention that in all the prayers that you're praying behind the Imam, yeah, that you're following the Imam. If you don't make that intention that you're following the Imam, you will void your prayer. The Imam is under obligation to make the intention that he is the Imam in 4 scenarios. The first is Salatul Khawf. The fear prayer. The second is, the prayer, rain prayer, when you combine the 2 prayers. The third prayer is in Salatul Jummah. And the fourth is Salatul Istikhlaf. Have you heard of this word? Istikhlaf? No? I'm telling you, every one of you are familiar with this word. Khalifa. Yeah? Or you've heard of it. What does that mean?
Leader.
No. Deputy. So istikhlaf is when you deputize. It's never happened to me, but if the imam, for whatever reason, has to leave, yeah, so he'll either put someone in his place, or he just moves. Then, if someone moves forward, takes his place, it's istikhlaf. Just a side note, which is just from me. If that happens, if the imam appoints someone, you have to follow him. If he puts himself forward, it's up to you. No, that's fair. Because the imam's not appointed him. So the choice is yours to obey him or not.
What's the adab around that? Would the imam call out the person to come forward, or you just pull him? And
no, whatever situation, if he's in sajda, or if he's in a ruku, or in standing, he'll indicate. Usually what you find is that, traditionally it's always, the muaddin or someone knowledgeable that's behind the imam. So if something happens, they just move forward. Historically, it's usually the muaddin is always, behind him or on the right of him. So where in ancient mosques, or where the governments appoint mosques, the deputy imam is always behind the imam. So if something happens, they just indicate and moves forward. Yeah. Okay. Sidi Mayara has a side note that, if you're leading, yeah, and you don't make the intention that you're the imam, yeah, prayer is valid, no problem. You won't get the reward of being in Jamaat. So if you're leading, just make the intention that you're the imam.
So if the person who ikhtilaf, is it? Deputizes the prayer.
Istikhlaf, yeah.
Istikhlaf.
Yeah.
Does he have to remake his intention to lead the prayer as
yes.
opposed to being following the prayer?
No. When he steps forward, he makes the intention. He's the imam leading the prayer.
Mm-hmm. That's a silent intention.
Oh, all intentions are silent. They're not articulated. They're always in your heart. Yeah. And when you lead the prayer, if you're leading prayer, then make the intention that you're the imam. Then you'll get the reward. If you don't, you've just fulfilled your prayer. Yes?
Isn't it like if it's possible for women, within women, to lead a prayer?
It's unheard of. We just don't have any record of it, and the jurists don't permit it. Because historically they've always provided space for women to pray with men. And in Nafil prayer, you find that the biggest Nafil prayer that pardon?
What is Nafil prayer? What does it mean?
Nafil, on top of your fard. Yeah, supererogatory prayer is Taraweeh. And the one who began it, in Jamaat was Sayyidina Umar. He appointed an imam for the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, for the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. So the women used to come and pray. They used to have their own imam, but it was a man. We just don't have a record historically of women leading women as amal. You'll find a record of it. There's inferred meaning from it, but we do not have categorical as a Jamaat a woman stepping forward and leading.
In none of the madhabs, not only in the Maliki, in none of the madhabs.
In the Hanafi, like the woman's in the middle of the line and then in the front.
Alhamdulillah, the
I've been in prayers where a woman was leading. So
really?
What, fard prayer?
The Shafi'iyah do permit it.
Do they?
Yeah, the Shafi'iyah.
Well, the Hanbalis even permit a woman to give a khutbah for Jummah, and she leads Jummah. Again, Malikis, we don't have it.
So
It's historically never happened. Yeah?
So in our madhab, women can't lead prayers for...
We just don't have it. It's, for us to give an opinion, it must have happened.
I see.
Do you understand? It must have happened. It must have been, the amal of the first community. We can't just come up with an opinion because we find a text. On the text there must be amal. We just don't have any, record of, the Sahaba or the Tabi'een or the Taba Tabi'een, the three generations vouchsafed, which can be brought forward as a Shari'i principle. We just don't have no record of, women leading women or women leading men. We just don't have it. And with Sayyidina Umar, gathering people behind, one imam, he gathered the women behind one imam as well. Tamim ad-Dari was appointed as the imam for the Sahabiyat. So what needs to be, when there is space, there must always be space for women, so they don't feel that they need their separate place. Because the only reason that people will demand something is because
They're not allowed in the mosque.
Huh? They're not allowed in the mosque. If there is, proactively you're providing space, you're providing wudu area, so on and so forth. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is the one that forced the hand of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have a separate entrance to the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the men and women used to come and go out from the same door. Sayyidina Umar said, okay, we'll have another one.
In the Prophet's masjid, was there a physical separation between?
There was not a physical separation. Go to the Muwatta of Imam Malik, you will find that the men and women used to do wudu together. Yeah.
How is that possible?
Isn't it easy to do wudu together? I'm not saying we do it now. It's not something that
was the early practice.
That was the practice. Because it just shows you that
What about your hair though? For women.
Women didn't have scarves the way that you put it. It was more, the dupatta that our women do it. That is how it used to be. So it's very easy to put your hand under and pull the thing forward and do mas on the head. It's not mushkil at all. It's very easy. It's I would love someone to write a PhD on how the scarf has come into our culture.
That would be interesting.
Because the scarf is something, seriously, when you get time, Sheikh Google is amazing. The pictures, you can actually, 100 years of record, look at, the dress of the Muslimah from North Africa, West Africa, Palestine, Iraq, China, India. You will not find a scarf.
When you say scarf, you mean like the whole wrap?
No. You know the way sisters wear scarves now? You will not find it.
So what would you find before?
You'll find, big chadar thing they used to cover themselves with.
It's like a loose...
Yeah, it was loose. Yeah.
So you know how in the Prophet's time you said like there was one door in the mosque and stuff like that? How come things became more like strictly like walls and...
What you mean walls?
Like how now, like there's a lot of like they separate men and women through walls and mosques and like, stuff like that. How come it became kind of? I'm just wondering, like.
Is it time for a break? Okay, look, I'll answer it for you.
Yeah.
It's when people walked away. There was. I'm very careful, and I'm fully aware of what I'm saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When people did not stick to the words and message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from those were, Sayyida Aisha, Sayyidina Umar, and other great Sahaba, and their opinions became, more dominant than the opinion of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this regard. And the madhab is on record that we are, out of the four madhabs, we are the ones that stick to the words of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Sayyida Aisha's opinion is brought forward that if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw what the women do now, he would forbid the women from the mosque, and Sayyidina Umar's opinion as well. Our scholars say Ra'sul Ayn, there are lords and masters, but who's the Nabi? Yeah, because the opinion of the school is that of Abdullah bin Umar, what he transmits from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do not bar the women from the mosques, and he beat his son to such a degree that he died from that beating, because he narrated that hadith. His son got up and said, I will, because his grandfather's opinion was that. He said, I will stop him from the mosque. He got up and beat him, and people had to come and stop Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar. He beat him to such a degree he died from it, and he did not witness his janazah, his own son's janazah. He did not witness it. And that's, the opinion that we take. Our fuqaha say that, the wajibat of salat, the wajib salats, women cannot be stopped from the mosques. The wajib daruri fi deen, knowledge, what we're going through now, the women cannot be stopped from attending them. As long as, dress and other things are kept in mind, otherwise they can't be stopped. We do not have this thing that they need to be locked away. The best place. I'm not saying that our fuqaha don't have this opinion. You will find, if you dig, you will find this opinion that the best place for a woman to pray is the back of her house. Yeah. You open our books of fiqh. The itikaf, women used to, nowadays is unheard of. Yeah, women, sitting itikaf in the mosque. And the ahkam are the same. The problem is that, what's happened is, rather than raising the bar, we've lowered it. Rather than, getting men to be men, yeah, we've just said, lock the women away.
So she has a controversial point of contention. If someone came up to me or whatever, because I go to uni, I get these questions all the time. And one question I got asked was, why don't you allow women to lead prayer? I mean, for me, it's easy to say, my deen just says that. But if someone did come up with that contention, a lot of Muslim people are coming up with this contention, that why can't the women lead the prayer?
We don't have any record of it. We really don't have any record of it. We've never had women, treated as women are treated now.
So in ritual matters, the madhab is quite conservative.
So again?
In rituals, the madhab is quite, we do whatever was the established practice.
No, but the established practice was that women were not stopped from mosques. That's not, something new. That's what the prophetic way was. And women can't be, when you find that, women are not allowed to come to mosques, when they're not taught that the Daruri fi Deen, you will have, what we have up north, that, women will demand a mosque of their own. And hand on my heart, good on them. Yeah. Why? Because when you don't give their due, they've got the right to demand it. Yeah. I would have encouraged them to go and take over the mosque rather than get a new mosque.
Faraz Ramadi did that. He said the women should just go to the mosque.
Take it over.
Yeah, just go and sit down inside.
No, just take the mosque over rather than get a new mosque.
On that revolutionary note.
Yeah. Shall we take a break? Inshallah. Because we're coming up to Dhuhr. Now, how long are we breaking for Dhuhr?
How long would you like? 45 minutes?
It's a bit long.
Half an hour?
Half an hour is good.
But I would suggest this time we just go ahead and pray instead of waiting for everyone to make wudu.
Okay.
So those who don't have wudu can
what
pray.
What time
after.
is Dhuhr here?
I believe it's in already.
Okay. So who's got wudu? Who needs to do wudu?